we'll get started soon, guys. Just trying to get everyone in real quick. Let's see, there he is. All right.
Here we go.
Yep. Grant, if you want, you can share your screen if you want to before we start.
Bryce, let me know what the plan is when we're ready to go.
Yeah, but I can add people as we go. So I do appreciate everyone's time and willing to spend a little bit of their day going through this. So today is sponsored by Rack Performance and GymAware, so I'm very fortunate to have those people, back what we're doing. And they're two great companies. One's weight room optimization or organization. The other one is velocity-based training. Both great companies. We use them highly. So if you ever have questions, that's another day we can go over that. But today, lucky to have on Coach Grant Geib. Is that right, Geib?
Geib.
Or Geib.
Yeah.
But he's been at Western Michigan for 2 years now as the head strength coach for Geib. All right. Head strength coach at Western Michigan for his second year. Spent 5 years at Purdue and was also a coaching assistant at the university. Well, fortunate. His boss was actually one boss. Their of course, the boss. So I respect coach and today. I will minimize me. All yours, coach. You are more welcome to share your page, and you're all set to go.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Bryce. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. So the way I have it set up for you guys, and I haven't seen how the other one of these have worked, but I have kind of a quick presentation, some different things on it going through. So I'm going to go log on to that. I'll share the screen so you guys can see it as we go through. Really informal. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot as we go. You don't have to wait till the end or anything like that. Kind of the way I set it up is whatever you guys want to spend more time talking on is where we'll spend more time kind of going through the presentation. So I'm going to pop this up here real quick. And I think that came up all right. All right. Can you guys see my screen all right?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay. Awesome. Perfect. All right. So the thing that I'm going to talk about today is basically power and explosive training. So the title of the presentation that we're going to go through is called Building the Power Pyramid. I am Grant Geib, mostly known as G2 in the strength conditioning world. Coach G2, players, coaches is kind of nickname I got early on, and it's stuck since then. So that works just as good. Coach G2 or Coach Geib is just fine, or you guys can call me Grant. I'm not too picky about it. Going into the presentation, couple things here real quick. So just a little bit kind of on my background. So I played football, played slot receiver at Ohio Wesleyan University as an athlete. During my time there, I was training and working at the Parisi Speed School, one of the satellite locations over in Cleveland, Ohio. And that's kind of where I got my start in the business. I was going there, didn't have a lot of money to pay for training. And so the guy was coaching, basically training me for free. And I was helping out with the younger athletes in return for the training program. So it was a great setup for me, kind of got me started in the profession and got going, into what I'm doing today. Then I went to University of Tennessee, got my master's degree there, worked as a graduate assistant, worked with baseball, tennis, and then worked my way into the football program. And Coach McKeefrey was the head strength conditioning coach there. So I worked for him at the University of Tennessee. both as a GA and then kind of as a coaching assistant for an extra season after that. Then I was at Purdue University for 5 years, working with the football program, baseball, and also working swimming and diving. And then from Purdue, after 5 seasons, I got blessed to get the opportunity to be the director of football strength conditioning at Western Michigan. So I've been there for 3 seasons, and this will be my 4th coming up this year. So a couple of things real quick, and I always, try to throw this stuff out there. Obviously the things that I'm going to talk about and stuff we're going to go over, it's all from stuff from people who have supported me kind of along the way. So first and foremost, faith and family, especially nowadays, and all the stuff that we're battling through. It's tough being quarantined, but faith has been a huge help. And I have a lot of fun. I got a 1-year-old daughter running around the house, so she keeps me pretty busy, at least kind of as I'm tied down here. And then Western Michigan, obviously the football family. Everything, kind of you'll see in this presentation is because we have a platform, to do what we do. Blessed to have a head coach who trusts in our program and what we do and gives us the opportunity, to run things at a high level. Ron McKeefery, who was the director of strength and conditioning at Tennessee when I was there. Dwayne Carlisle, who was at Purdue. Those guys are probably my biggest mentors. I've learned the most from, but there's been countless others, mentors, coaches, teachers. There's nothing in this presentation that is revolutionary. I'm going to tell you that I made up or came up with on my own. It's, spun from a ton of different influences and resources and people who have helped me along the way. And this is just kind of how we've tied it together. So, and then obviously Legacy Performance. Thank you guys for, the platform and opportunity to, go through the presentation and be at this round table today. All right. So getting down to business, power and explosive training. I threw a whole bunch of stuff up there, and it's really kind of, I just threw buzzwords up to put up, because there's a lot of things when people think of power and explosive training, there's a lot of different methodologies, a lot of different techniques, a lot of different strategies, in addition to, we see it running, cutting, jumping, in collisions. It's a huge part of most sports, football especially, which is, the realm where I spend most of my time in. But you can see that there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into it, and kind of the purpose of the presentation is to break it down, try to make it a little bit more simple, and break it down in a way where show you how we do it and we utilize it within our program. All right. So going through here, the first thing I'm going to talk about in the presentation is different scientific principles. This part is going to be pretty quick. I think I have like 5 slides on it, but kind of dive into some of the science and the technique work that goes into power training. So if you guys want to talk more about this, we can, but I'm going to hit on it real quick. Some of what I think are the most important principles for explosive and power training. So the first one, to train power, we have to understand the power equation and the variables that go into it. So we know, and you can see kind of the full equation and how it's worked out on the side, but power is force times velocity. So in simple terms, if we have more force, then we're going to produce more power, If we're stronger, then we have an ability to produce more power. If we have more speed, we're going to have more power. So whether I manipulate force or velocity, improving either one of those attributes is going to increase my ability to produce power, Within that, we also know that direction is a key component, Force and velocity are both directional variables. So it's extremely important that when we're applying forces and manipulating forces, we're also working the direction of force that goes along with it, whether that's the direction of force of us running or jumping, or whether it's a technique we're using in the movement to manipulate the way that we're applying the force. The direction of force is going to be extremely important, and it's a huge factor when we're training power. We need to think of realistically, how do we train it so that it transfers over to the sport, the technique, the movements that we're trying to accomplish. All right. Most athletes, they're going to favor one side or other of the equation. So a lot of guys are going to be more on the force side. That's where they're dominant. That's where they perform really well. A lot of guys might be more on the other side of the equation. They have great velocity and speed, quick twitch, but they're not as strong. And so we want to go optimize both of them, to the best of their ability. Then you guys can see on the graph kind of over here on the side, go back to that one real quick. The strength and power training, the guys who combine both aspects of that training perform the best across that curve, It's not just the strength side or just the speed side. For most athletes, we combine both. That's where we're going to see the most results, and that's what we're going to try to build. So the other huge kind of scientific principle that goes with it, and most of you guys are probably familiar with this, in different elements, and there's tons of different graphs on it. I like this one because it shows it with the speed variables as they go across. So anybody who uses velocity-based training is really valuable. But your force velocity curve, we know, right? We want to optimize force and velocity, but at my highest amount of force, velocity is low. At my highest amount of velocity, my force is low. So it's not, you can't be at max force and max velocity at the same time, right? There's an inverse relationship between the two. And so because of that, we need to train it throughout the curve, because in sport, especially a sport like football, you're going to use all of these qualities. Power is a quality that's going to be present across the entire curve in terms of which combination of force and velocity you're using. We know that peak power occurs between 30 to 80% of max force. That's a huge window, right? 30 to 80% is not very precise. It's going to depend on what type of athlete you are and what movement you are. I could get peak power on my squat might be 60%, but peak power on my bench press might be 40%. It's not the same for everybody. It's not the same based on the movement that you're trying to do. Again, the most important thing is to understand each variable across the curve is important, and there's always a relationship between the two. We want to try to make the best of both worlds. All right, so in addition to just the force and velocity curve, the rate of force development, all right, so the change in force over the change in time, how is that important? Well, that's going to be a huge, because if you look at the graph on the side, right, we know that there's windows of opportunity. So this graph over here, we know that, okay, in sport, you might only have 200 milliseconds or 300 milliseconds or 400 milliseconds to apply force. So because I have a limited amount of time to apply force, it becomes, okay, how fast can I tap into it? If I'm stronger, right, I'm probably going to be able to tap into force more quickly because it's a lower percentage. If I've trained it and I'm more explosive, I'm used to working at high velocities, same thing. I'm going to be able to tap into it quickly. But that window of opportunity for whatever your sport is going to be huge, and it's going to be important. If I'm sprinting, my ground contact time is probably 0.1 or less, right? So it's a very, very small window of opportunity. I can't produce that much force in 0.1, but I want to get as much as possible. In contrast, if I have 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, if I'm, doing a weighted jump, or I'm squatting and doing a more strength-oriented movement, well, now I have a lot more time to work with. So it just depends on what is my window of opportunity, how much time do I have, and then really how much, okay, can I maximize my force development in that time window. All right, stretch shortening cycle. So for the stretch shortening cycle is basically the primary theory on plyometrics. I'm not going to go through all the basics of the slide, but I love this slide because of how detailed it breaks it down and what goes into it. This is a great kind of chart to break down, okay, really how does the plyometric stretch shortening cycle process work? And it's important to understand that really there's two, if you look at the top, two physiological mechanisms, right? You have neurophysiological, which is basically we don't have a ton of control over. That's my proprioceptors, is the muscle spindles, and that rapid stretch, and it's literally a reflex, right? Stretch reflex of, okay, now my muscle contracts because of the high amounts of force that it was stretched under. And then you have the mechanical model on the other side, which is talking more about, okay, my ability to store energy and release energy through that process. And as those combine, it gives us opportunity. But the key factor in the stretch shortening cycle is we know the faster that it takes place, right, the more that stored energy gets released. The longer time that I spend in between, the more I'm losing power, and I get what's left, right? So if you look at the graph at the bottom, max speed and acceleration, I'm in very short time periods on there, so I can really utilize that. I'm still going to be able to use that stretch shortening cycle when I get over towards more jumping and more towards, okay, squatting and powerful movements. But at the same time, I'm not using that stretch shortening cycle to its full potential. So you just have to understand the difference. All right, is this window of time short and fast enough? Is it that 0.2 seconds or less where I'm trying to go, okay, peak speed off the ground and maximize that stretch shortening cycle? Or is it more of a movement where I'm still have the intent to move as fast and powerful as I can, but that stretch shortening cycle is not going to be a key factor in the equation. If I'm doing a weighted squat jump, I'm not going to get off the ground that fast, which is fine. It's still going to produce power, but it's not really working on this attribute. All right. And then the last one kind of that I'm throwing out there on the science side of things. So post-activation potentiation. So force production and the contractile abilities of muscles are impacted by previous loading activities. So we know, all right, there's a whole purpose behind why we warm up and do things in the first place before we go out and compete or before we go out and perform. The prior activity influences what you do next. There's a lot of research that shows if you do high force activity, so I've put the muscle through a high force, high effort contraction, after that, there's a window of time, there's a period of time where, okay, the muscle is still stimulated, and between different factors, it's going to perform at a higher level, and we can manipulate that to our benefit in training. So if you look at it on the graph, it has PAP and fatigue, right? So as fatigue is going up, when fatigue's at its peak, I don't have a great ability to perform, even though I'm super activated because my muscle's firing at a high level, right? If I do a heavy squat, my muscle is full go, firing, recruitment, synchronization, everything is going, but I have max fatigue at the same time. As that fatigue comes down, my activation will still come down, but there's a window where I still have a level of activation and my fatigue is low enough. And that's where it says that kind of optimal recovery time you see on the graph, where now, okay, I have a window of opportunity. So that's the whole principle behind any of the complex work, contrast work, all those stuff where you're stacking supersets from the heavier exercise to the lighter exercise. That's the principle that I'm trying to manipulate. All right. So does anybody have any questions kind of on any of that stuff so far? I know that's kind of the more boring part of it, but I think it's good kind of foundational understanding. It'll help make sense of everything else that we go through in the program. So far, so good?
I think we can keep going. I think if we have to, we can always circle back as well.
I'm sorry?
We can always circle back if people have
Okay.
questions that we missed them as well.
Okay. Sounds good. So I'll keep it rolling then through the next part of it. So the way I break it down and we use it is we kind of create a power pyramid. And it's important to understand on this, all the variables as we go through here, and it's kind of taken off that velocity curve, they build on each other, but just because they build on each other doesn't mean we only do absolute strength and then we move to strength speed, and then they're always interacting. You can train the variables simultaneously. It's just a matter of understanding kind of where you're going to get the most bang for your buck as you work your way up. So at the bottom, you can see 0 to 100%, right, of max load. And then you can also see the velocities that correspond to it for anybody who uses velocity-based training stuff there. The speed is extremely beneficial because the speed in some areas makes more sense than the actual percentages. And we know that percentages can change, right? My 100% max today might not be the same a week from now. Not because I detrained, but because my body could be in a completely different, all right, neuromuscular shape for that day, for that event, based on my sleep, based on my hydration, what I mean. There's tons of factors in it. The speed is going to be the speed. If I'm operating in that speed zone, then I know this is the quality that I'm training. So that's one of the benefits of it. But the different things that we're going to look at is absolute strength, and then working our way up to strength speed, speed strength, jumping, and plyometrics. So before we get into any of that, I just kind of throw this one on as a disclaimer. The foundation and prep work, you're going to need some amount of foundation and some amount of prep work for each of those phases. That's why most of us probably start at the beginning of the year. We go through a GPP phase, or we go through something where we're working on stabilization and eccentrics and load tolerance and things to make sure, okay, we're giving ourselves the opportunity to perform these qualities to the best of their ability. So a couple of things on there about develop capacities, right? We need a certain level of capacity, whether it's for speed, for strength, for even if you're working on endurance. You have to develop a capacity before you can really attack the variable full tilt and do it safely. Load tolerance, right? Obviously, I'm not going to start day one at 100% of max load. I have to build up a load tolerance for my muscles, for my joints, for my tendons. It's an important factor as you're going through your training progressions. Movement techniques. If I'm not proficient at the movement technique, well, then if I'm putting load on top of poor technique, we know that's a recipe for disaster, right? So we want to have some proficiency in the movements that we're doing before we're attacking them from a full tilt strength and power standpoint. All right. Deceleration and absorption of forces. In simple terms, we want to make sure that we can control the movements. We want to be able to control the movement under force before we're asking the body to perform it with maximal amounts of force. And then, as I talked about before, we know that force is a directional, right, variable. The direction of force is going to be hugely important to the way that I'm training. If I'm progressing exercises, I need to make sure that my early, all right, progressions, the early part of my program incorporates lateral movements and rotational movements if I'm going to progress the full tilt power movements on them later on. There should be a steady progression across the board. And that's important that, okay, if I'm going to end with all kinds of jumping and twisting and multi-directional work, it needs to be a part of my program from the start to continue to prepare it. So getting into absolute and accelerative strength zones, absolute strength, we're talking about over 90% or anything that's less than 5.5 meters per second when we're measuring the speed of it. And then accelerative strength, 70 to 90% or 0.5 to 0.7 meters per second. Okay. These are the training zones that most of us live in probably most of the year, I would guess. Obviously, we can't train at 90% year round, so we cycle it in and out, and we work those loads between 70 and 90% as we're building up, manipulating volumes and intensities kind of along the way. The important thing, this is, a huge variable and why I kind of have it as the base of the pyramid. Improving max strength is going to improve my relative strength, right? What I mean by that, so I put a quick example. If my squat max goes from 300 to 350 pounds, moving 200 pounds goes from 66% to 57% of my max, right? At that point, it's become easier and it's become faster because 57%, a lot easier to move than 66%. So when we're talking about being able to produce power, just by getting stronger, I'm going to get more powerful because my relative strength has improved in that area. Right? So now if I'm out on the field and I'm asked to produce 100 pounds of force, 200 pounds of force, and that feels lighter and that feels easier, it's going to be more explosive. So just because I'm working these things in a range where force is the predominant variable that I'm training and I'm moving slow, by getting stronger, I'm still increasing my ability to move fast and be more powerful. And I think that's huge to understand. Most of your athletes, as we advance up the pyramid to more dynamic parts of the training program, this base is going to set them up for success all the way across the board. The intent to move fast is important during these exercises as well. Using accommodating resistance helps with that. We don't use accommodating resistance anytime that we do strength work, but bands and chains, they kind of help with that. Okay, my emphasis is on accelerating and moving the bar fast. Even if it's not moving super fast, I'm trying to move it as hard and as fast as I can every time I get under the bar. That intent to move fast is going to lead to physiological adaptation, and it's going to carry over later on when I get into more explosive forms of training. The other thing with the heavy work, we talked about the PAP in the beginning and how, okay, the previous activity is going to stimulate the muscle to perform at a higher level for what it does next, as long as we're in that magic window of opportunity. So complex training, whether we're doing strength exercise combined by plyometrics or contrast training, where we're going to heavier exercise to a lighter exercise. Maybe you're doing 3 exercises, a heavy, a medium, and a light. This is a huge application to that where I can train strength and then concurrently work on some more explosive ideas as well. So next part of the curve, jumping into strength speed. So 50 to 70% or 0.75 to 1.0 meters per second. All right, this is really, for a lot of movements, is going to be our max power zone. This is where we're going to hit max power. I think an easy way kind of to think of it in terms of some of these qualities is these are power exercises with more of a force production emphasis, hence the strength coming first, right? It's still an explosive movement, but I'm still shifted more towards the strength side of the equation. And I had one coach say this, it's not backed by science or anything like that, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Max power, right, or above is more your strength speed zone. So if I'm at my peak and my max power, if I'm at or above that, that's where I'm working predominantly strength speed side of the equation. In the other side, when we get to the next slide, when we go to speed strength, it really works the other way. If I'm at max power or below it, Now I'm working more speed strength because it's more on the velocity side of the equation. But for the strength speed, so we're thinking about max power, all right, or above it, about 10 to 20%. And we're thinking of focus on dynamic effort movements. So this is a lot of stuff that you guys will see with the gym aware units or push units or whatever velocity-based training measurement that you're using, where you're kind of in that 0.75 to 1.0 range. A lot of accommodating resistance is incorporated in this stuff, bands, chains, helping to work. Okay, how can I try to make sure this weight is light enough that I can move it explosively? There's still resistance on there. There's still going to be a training stimulus on the force side of things, but now I'm really getting after how fast can I do it. And then my heavier Olympic movements are going to fall into this speed zone as well. So obviously your clean, your snatch, and the variations of them, when you're working heavier, all right, so up around 80%, now I'm probably closer to this speed zone for most guys. Flipping it to the speed strength side of the equation, so that's my 30 to 50%, 1 to 1.3 meters per second in the speed. This is another, I can still hit max power in this zone. It depends on the exercise that I'm doing. But this one, we're more of a velocity emphasis. So again, it's going to be, okay, my emphasis is at max power or that 10 to 20% below max power. So I'm more on the speed side of the curve in the equation. The majority of my Olympic lifts are going to hit at this speed, which is why the speed is important, is not really the percentages, right? Because we don't program, all right, we're going to clean 30% today or 50%. But if we're hitting them, they might be 60 or 70%. They're going to hit in that 1.0 to 1.3 speed range. So that's where the speed range can be helpful with some of those movements. So the majority of our Olympic work, I know the way that we do it, we spend a lot of time lighter and faster on our Olympic work. We try to use it more for power and explosive development. When it gets too heavy, from my experience, it tends to get a little bit sloppy if you don't have super proficient lifters. So we spend most of our time lighter and faster. Let's have great technique and let's get the bar moving as fast as we can. And then also maybe your intro weeks on your dynamic effort movements, or if you're going all in on a power phase towards the end of a program, all right, my dynamic effort movements, I still might have some of these that hit over 1.00 if that's what I'm trying to accomplish. So the next block that we go into here is jump training. So a lot of, if you look at most charts, they call this quality starting strength. This is where we do most of our jump work, is kind of within this range, 30% or less, all right, of max. So if we're doing any kind of weighted jumps, it's probably falling into this range. 1.3 meters per second or faster. Usually you don't have to measure that aspect of it for most of these because you're going to be moving that fast if the weight is that light. But obviously now my full emphasis is on the velocity side of the equation. It's not heavy enough where it's going to make me stronger really at any level anymore. It's all about, okay, I'm working on rate of force development, producing force quickly, and maximizing the velocity in my movements. So the way we break down our jumps is phase one is kind of landing technique. So everything that we do is sticking the landing. So we're making sure that we have control and balance. Now, in certain exercises, we coach to land soft. We don't want them stomping the ground, but we don't want them to land and fall into mush either. When the guys are hitting the ground, we want absorb and then come to a stick, fixed athletic position. So if I'm doing an altitude landing, dropping off a box, I don't want to land on the ground and fall all the way down into a full squat. I want to jump off the box and be able to stick it and set myself up in a power position, in a jumping position to go into the next jump. So our first one is, all right, controlling the landing technique. Phase two is now, okay, we're going to add some counter movement jumping in and we'll add more jumps to it. So we go quick to stick is what we call it. So we might hit one jump, say we're doing jump and then land and stick that landing. Counter movement, down, up, jump, and then stick the landing. If we're doing a skater jump out to the side, jump out to the side, quick touch back, and then stick it. If we're over mini hurdles, we're going quick over one hurdle and then stick over the next hurdle. So we're still working that combination where now I have a little bit more momentum where I have to stop, control the force, and stick and slow down, but I'm starting to introduce kind of those continuous and more counter movement principles into it. Phase three is continuous jumps, which we combine with a lot of weighted jump variations, whether that's on a Vertimax, bands, dumbbells, med balls, you name it. What can I incorporate to add a little bit extra resistance and be powerful hitting one jump into the next? And we kind of use that as a prep to go into plyometrics. So plyometrics, now my full goal is to move as fast as possible. And we separate it from the jump training because when we're jumping, for us with our guys, the way we explain it is more about, okay, maximum height, maximum distance when we're jumping. When we're getting into plyometrics, now the height or the distance isn't as important as the speed off the ground. We still want to jump as high as we can, but the speed off the ground becomes much more important. So we always separate, okay, jump training is focused on maximum power, plyometrics focused on maximum speed, and really speed off the ground. How quick can I get off the turf? So plyometrics, we're trying to maximize that stretch shortening cycle like we talked about in the beginning. Overemphasis on speed off the ground. Everything is hot off the ground. We progress from low to high amplitude. So basically from low bounces and quick touches off the ground to higher stepping off a box or into, you know, a full broad jump or a full vertical jump. But we start them lighter because it's easier to be faster off the ground when you're hitting smaller jumps, mini hurdles, pogo jumps, things of that sort. Great for post-activation potentiation complexes. So when I'm doing my heavy training, it's real easy to work in. All right, so plyometrics in between heavy squats, all right, heavy RDLs, heavy deadlifts, whatever you're doing in your program, it works really well. Heavy single leg work. And then French contrast training, which I can dive into more detail if anyone wants to know more about it. Basically, I'm doing 4 exercises where I'm doing a heavy exercise. Then from the heavy exercise, I'm doing a plyometric. Then I'm doing a heavy exercise into an assisted exercise at the end. So the last one, I'm really doing like overspeed plyometrics, kind of is the way it works. So I can go into that in more detail if people have questions on it later, but that's a great method of training as well that kind of incorporates really the full spectrum of the things that we've talked about. All right, so does anybody have any questions kind of going through that part of it? The next part of the presentation is going to be on really how we put it together and structure it in our program.
Talk about accommodating resistance and how you guys use it, if you do use it.
Yes, so we use it throughout the program in different phases. We use it a whole bunch in season actually. To help manipulate training loads and things like that. But with our accommodating resistance, we use bands and we use chains. And really the way that we do it is we take, all right, however much resistance is on the band or the chain, we subtract it from the max, and then we program the percentage based off of the subtraction from the max. Is kind of how we draw it up. And we use it a lot in our summer block, which I'll get into kind of in the next part of our the presentation. And we use it a lot in season so that we can train heavier, but now we can manipulate loads at the bottom of the movement. You know, so when I'm at the bottom of the squat, it's not as heavy. When I'm at the bottom of the bench, I'm taking some load off the shoulder. And we also use reverse bands a lot in season as well, for, you know, with the same kind of principle in mind.
And then what about, I know you're talking about a lot with velocities. What equipment do you guys use to measure your velocities?
So when I was at Purdue, we used gym wear. We don't have that luxury at Western Michigan, so we use push units. So the band that kind of goes on the arm, like an arm sleeve, or it goes and clips to the bar, and it's wireless. From my experience, it's a good product. It's much more affordable. Probably not as accurate as a gym wear, but it gets the job done for us, and it's pretty user friendly as well.
And then we got one from Adar. How would you apply this to a high school setting with kids?
So I will go through the next part of my presentation and show you how we do it. I would spend more time in high school on the technique in the beginning phases in terms of body position, eccentrics, and that's what I'll get into in the next part of my presentation. But really for those guys, it's kind of, okay, I want to optimize my strength and technique at the high school level.
And then from Richard Irving, do you have iPads at each rack, or do the athletes use their phones with push?
We have an iPad. We bought refurbished ones, and we have an iPad on each rack. Depending on the exercise, the guys either pass the band off the wrist or we just leave it clipped to the bar.
All right. where do you guys where do you guys focus most of your time at in season when it comes to what part of strength you're in, whether it's absolute strength, speed strength? Do you guys live within different realms, or are you guys pretty consistent within one?
We spend most of our time in season in absolute strength and accelerative strength. Now, when we're doing stuff pushing more towards the absolute strength side of things, we're probably doing it with accommodating resistance, and the volume is very, very low.
Yeah.
But in season, we know that they're moving fast, right? Out at practice, the guys are running, jumping, cutting. They're moving very explosively at practice. So the power work starts to take over more and more on the football side. And so we're worried about maintaining our levels of strength so that we can continue to balance it out with the power.
And then from Ty Burt, reverse bands, what was your purpose? Were you talking about the last part of French contrast?
So there's a couple different ways that we use them. So we use them for the last part of French contrast for the jumps. So kind of for those overspeed jumps where it's assisting you in helping you get off the ground faster. We also use reverse bands if we're in a power phase and we want to say, okay, maybe we're doing a speed strength movement and we want to have a little bit of assistance to make sure we're moving the heavier weight, but we're helping with the acceleration out of the bottom. So the reverse band is pulling the barbell up to hit some of those higher speed zones. And then in season, one of my favorite in-season exercises is reverse band squat. And we're doing it really pretty heavy. But now we're deloading the squat significantly at the bottom of the movement. So we're taking some pressure off the knees, some pressure off the back, kind of deloading the spine in some of those more compromising positions. And that's been a great in-season exercise for us as well. And we do the same thing with bench for the shoulders. By having those bands tied up high and it's pulling me out of the bottom, it's less stress on the shoulder when I'm benching. Still get full range of motion, but less stress on the joints.
All right. Just a couple of questions everyone had.
Keep it rolling?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the next part, and this will help answer some of the questions that you guys had as well. I know I got the question about the high school program. This will break down kind of how we do it, and then I can talk about some variations as we go through. By no means am I claiming that this is the absolute perfect best program, the way to design it. This is just what works for us and how we do it. Obviously, I'm biased to it. I believe in it. I think it works pretty well, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. This is just kind of our strategy. So the way that we did our program, and this is how it was originally drawn up. Obviously, it's been exploded at this point, which I'll talk a little bit about at the end if you want to know what we're doing right now. But this was the original plan and how we run kind of most years. All right. So winter 2020, we focused on the strength side of things. We spent a lot of time on tempo and eccentrics. So by controlling the tempo of the lift, by maximizing the eccentric load, right, we know that that's going to increase the volume because of the time under tension. So whether it's high rep or lower rep, if I'm having a long time under tension under the bar, it's still giving me a high volume of stimulus, right? So great for hypertrophy to get the guys started at the beginning of the year. Plus, if they're being forced to control the weight, it's probably going to help make them more proficient at the technique because it's really hard to do a 7-second eccentric if you're squatting with your heels off the ground, So it helps us really be able to manipulate that and control the movements and what the guys are doing. So that's kind of the emphasis of our strength program in the wintertime. Let's slow everything down. Let's learn how to do it right. When we squat, we put bands around the knees so the guys have to drive the knees out. Little tricks like that. We try to find a way, okay, how can we maximize the technique and what we're doing? On the speed side of things in the wintertime, we do 2 days a week of speed work. The focus is really on redeveloping some capacity. And we run a pretty fast up-tempo warm-up that kind of gets the aerobic capacity going. And that's where we touch on it, is just by keeping the pace of our warm-up pretty quick. It's probably about 20 minutes, and it's fast. It includes a lot of stuff, a lot of, what you would call, for lack of a better word, prehab exercises, flexibility and mobility, different movement and activation work. Mechanics, we spend a lot of time on technique. So in terms of, going back to the basics of arm action and triple extension and wall drills and knee up, toe up positioning when we're doing different exercises. Acceleration is where we spend the majority of our fast work. So really we're working 10 yards, maybe 20. during that time. And then deceleration, we spend a lot of time on the brakes, whether that's linear, whether that's lateral. We do a lot of different drills where we might be moving 3 to 5 yards, slam on the brakes, have balance, have control, and then burst out in another direction. But that's a huge part of the work that we do. And that's how I describe it to the guys. Like, guys, we need to get the brakes right before we go into some more advanced stages of training. And it sets us up really well for spring ball. We have an early spring ball. We start spring ball in February, the way we have our schedule set up here. So it's really 6 weeks is what we go through in the winter to get ready for the spring. So a lot of that deceleration work is huge, kind of getting our guys healthy and able to perform football movements once we get rolling. On the power side of things, we do a lot of Olympic technique work and a lot of complexes. So we spend a lot of time combining movements. It's another way I get more time under tension, right? I get more volume out of what I'm doing. It lets me control the load. So they're not going to go too heavy if they're doing, you know, a complex through 3 or 4 times. So it keeps them from overloading the bar while we're trying to work on the quality of the movement. We do a lot of stuff on cadence with our Olympic work where we're calling it out for the whole room. So they're working at the same tempo, at the same cadence together. So we have control of the pace of it. And then we do a lot of complexes with kettlebells and dumbbells as well. And then we do phase 1 of our jumping program. So that's our landing position stuff, altitude landings, a lot of basically anything where we're sticking the landing, whether it's lateral, whether it's stepping off of a box, whether it's firing fast into a lunge and sticking the position at the bottom. Everything is about, okay, can I slam on the brakes and control it? And then as we get towards the end of it, we work in some of those quick to stick progressions where now it's kind of, all right, 1 jump, quick touch, and then stick the landing. As we get into our spring program, so we're into spring practice. Now we continue to increase the load. We're not at absolute strength yet at this point, but we're, you know, moving up probably into 80%, and we lower the volume. So the volume now is going to come down because there's a lot more demand on the running side of things because of football practice. We have 3 spring football practices a week. So we adjust it accordingly. And then we incorporate that accommodating resistance like I talked about, whether that's using the reverse bands or whether it's just using regular band chain setup with those guys. Okay, now I'm deloading some positions at the bottom, and it's still going to encourage them to move the bar with the intent to move fast. Because we're going to train heavier, but we're still not at that absolute strength yet. We're very much into preaching, okay, move the bar with great intensity. As fast as you can move it, I want you to move it. It might not move like we're doing a speed squat, but I want you to think of it as a speed squat as we're doing it. And then we do a lot of partial movements. So when we're incorporating stuff in, we might do half squats off the rack. We might do board bench presses. And that's a staple for us in season as well. We work in different, now if we're doing those, say we're doing a board press, then we might be supersetting with push-ups or something else where they're still getting full range of motion work. If we're doing a rack squat or a half squat, then we might be doing a goblet squat at some other point in the program. So we're still working on bending in full ranges of motion, but we're restricting the loads to try to take some pressure off of the joints. In our speed work, really all we're doing is CNS activation stuff, whether that's, you know, ladder drills and some footwork things pre-practice. That's pretty much the extent of the speed work we do because football practice is the speed training. And then on the power side of things, for our Olympic work, we work on pulls. We do some box jumps. Takes a little bit off of the eccentric load in the landing position, but we still get to work on that push off. And then we do a lot of kettlebell work as well. All right, so our first summer block, which for us kind of hits in April and May. So now we're going really into a true strength phase at this point and really start attacking that absolute strength. We also hit at more of a higher volume. So if you're looking at like Prilipin's chart or some of the other charts out there, we're on the higher end of the volume for how many sets we're doing in that absolute strength arena. And then we also work in a lot of single leg variations. We do them earlier in the year as well, but when we get to our summer program, kind of the way we set it up is we have a heavy single leg day and we have a heavy regular squat day. And we're always 1 day a week is single leg, 1 day a week is double leg. And kind of that's how we set it up. It's worked out really well for us. When we go to our speed work, we're incorporating resisted movements. So whether that's a sled, a bungee cord, a band, a hill, we're trying to say, okay, now I'm going to run with some extra resistance. so that I have to produce more force for running and for acceleration. And then change the direction. We now, okay, less emphasis on deceleration, more emphasis on quick changing direction. We get into some bounding, and then we start working on our top speed mechanics. So we start getting into more for our skill guys. Our big guys really don't do top speed mechanics, but for our skill guys, we start to get into some of that, you know, driving tall, butt kick technique, and, you know, posture, arm action, things like that. And then on the power side of things, we're working in now, you know, full Olympic lifts. We're getting after it pretty good on those at this point. And then our phase 3 jumps. So we have 2 Olympic days a week and 2 jumping days a week. On our jumping days, we're now into continuous jumps. So it's one jump into the next. It's not plyometric yet. They're going to absorb it and jump, absorb it and jump, but there's no pause in between. As soon as I absorb it and I can recoil, I'm going into the next one. But again, the emphasis is on power and height or distance. And then we incorporate our weighted jump variations in there as well. Summer block 2. So this is now June and July. We're going into more absolute strength. We're going into a separate phase on it. We're probably changing some movements, changing whether it's changing a barbell, changing accommodating resistance. We're doing something to adjust the movement that we're doing. We're still going to work a single leg day in there. We're decreasing the volume of it though, which is big. So we're still training heavy, but now we're pulling back on the volume because we're putting more of an emphasis on the power and on the jumping side of things. So because we're doing more jumping, cutting, sprinting, we pull back a little bit on the heavy strength work volume. And then we start to incorporate complexes. So we start to superset our strength work with power exercises. On the speed side of things, we tap into some overspeed. We use reverse bands, or we have kind of like a slight downhill area where we can train as well. But the bands work pretty well for us. We get into agility. So progressing from change of direction to agility basically means we're making it more reactive. Where now the drills are less pre-programmed. It has more of a decision-making factor in the different things that we're doing, whether we're reacting off calls, off of movement, off of another body. We start to be a little bit more outside the box with the change of direction work. And then we also use post-activation potentiation in our sprint work. So we might do a sled sprint, and then we pop the sled off, get a quick rest, and then we sprint without it. Or we do a band, and then we do a free sprint. Or we do a hill, and then we do a free sprint. We start to manipulate those as well, and that works out pretty good. On the true power side of things, we continue with our Olympic lifts. We keep working on those. We just kind of reload another cycle on that. And then we get into true plyometrics. So now everything is emphasizing speed and being fast off the ground. It correlates really well with the top end speed work that we're doing this time, because when I'm at top end speed, you know, I'm trying to get off the ground as fast as possible. So it kind of pairs up pretty well with that. And then we're incorporating, again, complexes. Most of the power work we do is supersetted with our strength work. And then we incorporate some of that French contrast stuff as well. And then the last part of it, the in-season, I can run through pretty quick. The in-season really is not much different than what we do in spring ball. It's just longer. It just takes more time. So when we're in there, it's still high load, low volume. We're incorporating that accommodating resistance. As I talked about, I love using reverse bands in season. I think it's a great way to still work full range of motion and take some load off. We still use those partial movements. And then we're also, we make a conscious effort to limit eccentric loading when we're doing in season as well, just because there's so much of it that's occurring for so long throughout the season. So a lot of stuff that we're doing, you know, what we might be doing box squats. So we focus more on the concentric part of it. You know, if we're doing anything where we're pulling, we're focusing more on the concentric portion of the movement. It's just kind of a way that we manipulate tempos or the style of exercise that we're choosing to focus on that. If we're doing, you know, the heavier work with the bands, a lot of times we'll tell the guys, drive down fast, get up fast. When we're in season, control it on the way down and just focus on coming up fast. That's, you know, another way that we try to control that. And then on the speed side of things, same as in the spring, you know, it's really CNS activation, couple ladder drills, maybe some low amplitude plyometrics. But besides that, we're really going right into practice. And we continue with some box jump and kettlebell work on the power side of things. We don't do much Olympic work once we truly get into football season, unless it's with our younger guys, our rookies and redshirt guys who are still really in a full training program because they're not playing much in the games. So that pretty much rounds it out. I'll stay as long as you guys want to talk shop and answer questions and things like that. You got my email on there. My Twitter is on there. If you go to my Twitter page and you're looking for ideas for right now, I'm bored, so I just keep pumping out home exercises and home workouts for our guys. There's a lot of stuff on there. So if you're interested in, what are you guys doing now? Now that I painted this clear picture of this awesome program that we drew up and we're going to run this year and is now exploded. Well, if you want to know what we're doing now, if you go on my Twitter page, you'll get a good idea of how we're training our guys currently, through the situation that we're doing.
Can you go through some of the progressions that you choose to do for your Olympic lifts, like throughout the different time periods, whether it's, winter, spring, summer 1 or summer 2? Are there different things that you're progressing through, or is it all mainstay for the movements?
No, it kind of shifts based on the time, based on the time of the year. Originally, we start out, excuse me, doing complexes. So in a complex, we might do, all right, we're going to pick the bar up off the ground in a strong position. We're going to do a RDL. Then we're going to do a hang position shrug. Then we're going to do a high pull, a hang clean, drop it, and do it again. And we might do that 3, 4, or 5 times. If it's a snatch workout, we might start our first couple ones really light with the bar. And all right, we're taking the bar up. We're going to pick it up off the ground. We're going to go into a shrug. Then we're going to go into a snatch. Then we're going to go into an overhead squat. Then we might bring it down and drop into a full snatch balance, and then bring it down and go from there. So the complexes is really what we use just to drill technique over and over and over again in the wintertime. We also do a lot of tempo pulls in the wintertime as well. So we start from the floor position and we call, all right, I'll yell out 1, position number 1 is below the knee. 2, position number 2 above the knee. 3, we're up to mid thigh. Pull, everybody pulls into a shrug and drops it. And then we might progress that into a position working the way up 1, 2, 3, clean, but those are kind of our winter variations. When we get into the springtime, we go to all pulls. So everything is really, we do our clean pulls from the ground and our snatch pulls from the hang position, and they're high pulls. So the snatch is high pull, the clean is that shrug pull off the floor. And then when we get into the summertime, now in the summer, we basically start at lighter intensities and we work fast. And we kind of go up to heavy, and then we go from heavy back down to light as we get into the power phase. And it's truly a pyramid. We start light, work our way up. At the end of summer 1, we're probably 80, 85%. And then we start coming back down as we get into more of the power phase and emphasize more bar speed again.
And then what is your guys' focus on your, speed progressions or acceleration or your top speed? Can you go over some of your, I'd say, your best bang for your buck for some of the coaches, or what you guys like to focus on?
So for acceleration, I think the best technical drill for acceleration are ones where you have something to control your body position. So I really like wall drills just for body position. The old school drill, you lean on the wall, knees up, toes up, switch, 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 work it in calls of, 1 step, 3 step. Sometimes we go switch, switch, go, and then fire, a bunch of reps as fast as we can. And then the other one that works really well for acceleration technique is sled drags. So we do like a sled march, load up a sled. You're not sprinting, you're literally marching, work on knee up, toe up, opposite arm, opposite leg, and just marching 1 step at a time. Really robotic, just syncing up. Okay, can I control my body angle? Can I control the angle of force I'm putting into the ground? Can I get good arm action where I'm really stretching and pulling my elbows back? Those are 2 of my favorite exercises. We do a bunch of that stuff in the wintertime. And then we manipulate starting positions to kind of help work with that as well. So a lot of push-up starts or half kneeling starts, those help the guys emphasize pushing off the front leg and kind of emphasize that 45-degree takeoff angle in acceleration. And that's really where we spend the bulk of our time for the first 4 months. Once we get into the summertime, then we add in the resisted sprinting, which still helps a lot especially when we work it into contrast, because if I'm doing a sled sprint, the sled's probably controlling my angle if I'm at least somewhat into my technique, whether it's a sled or a hill, the resistance is going to put you in more of an acceleration angle. It's going to force you to put more force into the ground. And now that's very fresh in my head for the sprint that I do coming after that. So by pairing those up together in a complex, I think it works really well. One, you get the, you know, the physiological benefit, that post-activation potentiation, where in theory, if I do it right, I should be faster. But at the same time, you know, those weighted movements or resisted movements really help to reinforce technique.
And then what about, say you have a single leg day and a, you know, a bilateral day? What are your single leg movements that you're doing throughout your program?
So, excuse me. I gotta get my coaching voice back. I'm not used to talking this much in my house. So we usually start off with a split squat or Bulgarian split squat, so rear foot elevated split squat. In our early part of the phase, it's tempoed and it's very lightweight. So we're either, same thing, we'll call it in like a 1, 2, 3 drop to the bottom, or we'll work it in, you know, 7, 6, 5, 4 slow eccentrics, but we're manipulating the speed of it so we can get the technique right. It makes it easy also, if the speed is slow, to walk around and coach guys, you know, where I can walk around and say, okay, make sure your weight's on your heel, make sure that your knee is pointed straight ahead, make sure your chest is up. It gives us an easy opportunity when they're moving slow to coach those things up as well. From there, as we go into kind of the second part of it, we get into more lunge progressions, because now there's more eccentric load as I'm coming down and stepping with the movements, whether that's a lateral lunge or a forward lunge or a reverse lunge. We do some stuff where we do like a step backwards and then drive forward into a lunge. You can do those with barbells or dumbbells. And that's kind of the second part of it. And then we go to some heavier loaded split squats also sometimes at that time. We use a safety bar. If you have a safety bar, hand supported split squat is an awesome exercise. It puts a little bit more emphasis on the back leg. That one usually comes into play for us more in the summertime, because now we've added more of that back leg push off. It gets into that kind of triple extension sprinting angle. So that's a good variation that we use as well. We do a reverse lunge, step forward into a step up, which is an awesome exercise. Takes some coordination, but it really gets you with some momentum going forward and then putting power as I step up onto the box. So those are probably the favorite ones that we use, and they just get more and more explosive kind of as we go too. You know, sometimes they might be an auxiliary exercise, sometimes they might be a heavier strength exercise, and sometimes it just might be for speed or power. It just depends on where we're fitting it into our program. But those are the ones that we use the most.
And then what do you think your favorite PAP complexes are for your guys?
So for our bigger guys, I really like doing heavy kettlebell swings and broad jumps, because I think it really just emphasizes them firing their hips forward, which is such a huge part of what they do on the line of scrimmage. We don't get too crazy with, you know, a lot of like box jumps and hurdle jumps, things like that for our big guys. But I'm really a big fan of the broad jump kettlebell swings. We also do one, we call them thruster jumps, but basically we crisscross bands on their chest and we put a bench out and they basically dive over the bench. And so the bands are pulling back on a 45-degree angle and they jump out and come back. Basically with our big guys, it's all firing the hips. So we might incorporate that one also with a broad jump as well, or we might put all three of them together. We might go resisted jump with the band, then we're going to go kettlebell swing, and then we're going to go, you know, we'll work in some different combinations with that. But that one works really well for us. For the skill guys, I'll give you two. The heavy squat is always a good one to start. And we tend to use a lot of French contrast stuff when we get into our later phases. I think it works really well. And it flows pretty smoothly, especially if 4 or 5 guys at a rack, because there's multiple things for them to do in the circuit. So we go heavy squat, then we go to a mini hurdle jump up onto a box. So we go over a mini hurdle, quick touch, and up onto the box, and then come back around. Over the mini hurdle, up onto a box. We keep adding mini hurdles each week. So week 1's 1 hurdle, and then 2, and then 3. So you're getting more and more quick touches in kind of each week for your reps. The third exercise we incorporate into it is a squat jump. So we might use a barbell, we might use a med ball, we might use a dumbbell, depending on where the guys are at. And then we finish off with those overspeed, the jump. All right, the band's hooked underneath my armpits. I hold on to it, and it's pulling me in that quick touch off the ground. If you don't have overspeed bands, you could just do pogo jumps where they're jumping, you know, maybe a foot off the ground, but it's just quick touch, quick touch, quick touch, emphasizing the speed of it as fast as possible. We also do a similar variation of it, but we work the exercises all single leg. So we might do a heavy split squat or a lunge or Bulgarian split squat, and then we do a single leg, all right, over a mini hurdle up onto a box. And then we go to, all right, now we're going to do a split jump. So, you know, a lunge jump with a switching feet up in the air. And we might do that with dumbbells, probably not with a barbell on that one, mostly dumbbells. And then when we go over, same thing, we hook on the reverse bands, and we'll hit the reverse bands either with a quick single leg jump, or we'll work that also from a split stance position, quick touches off the ground.
And then what about your guys' change of direction to agility progression? Because I know you're kind of like myself, where change of direction is kind of, I'd say, the skill of understanding the angles, and then the actual agility is, you know, having, you know, like you said, whether it's a voice or an action or a mirror. Are there certain things you guys focus on to set your guys up for the change of direction into the agility progression?
So phase 1, basically, of our change of direction work, like I talked about, is overemphasis on the brakes. Everything is coming to, all right, slam on the brakes, stop, be in control before you go in any other direction. You have to be able to stop. So we started off literally with a step. We might go shuffle 1 step and break down, or take 1 step forward and break down. And then we go to 3 steps, and then we go to 5 yards. In each of those positions, they have to freeze, be in complete control of their body position. And then we'll hit a second whistle or a second go call where they might burst forward at an angle. They might burst backwards. They can burst again in any direction, but it's all about, okay, the first thing that you have to do is be in a balanced position. And it works as a good training tool, because if the guys are out of control in an unbalanced position, then when we go and blow the whistle for that second sprint, they have a pretty bad start because they weren't put in a proper position to begin with. So that works as a good progression for it. Then the second part of it, we go to, all right, you're going to go there, break down, but we're going to hit the whistle faster. Then the third step to it, all right, you're going to run and cut. There is no second whistle. You already know where you're going, but it's pre-programmed. Once kind of that part of it is mastered through the wintertime, then we go into, all right, more of your basic cone drills, you know, star drill, box cone drills, different diagonal drills, might be like bag work, things like that. But now I'm incorporating multiple changes of direction, multiple different patterns, and that we're taking that pause out. Like they have to cut, they have to change direction and be efficient, moving kind of around that grid, forward, angle backwards. And then the last part of it is we start to incorporate some similar drills, but we might incorporate mirror drills where now we're adding, all right, another person to the equation. We're adding in certain calls. A lot of stuff that we do is a simple, you're running or jumping, you land, and you're just getting a right or a left, but you don't know where you're going. You're taking out uncertainty, so they have to make the decision quickly, or maybe it's make the decision in the air if it's a jump, and be able to land and explode in different directions.
All right, and then we got a question from Ty Bird. What does the volume of field work look like in the winter versus the summer?
So in the wintertime, we do a 3-day lift program. We lift Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we run Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we have 3 days in the weight room, 2 days out on the field. I've done it that way the past 2 years. I like it a lot because when you're on the field, you're not rushed. You can really focus on, okay, I got an hour and 15 minutes where I can take 20 minutes to warm up and keep the tempo of my warm up fast. I can get a ton in 20 minutes. And then from my warm up, all right, I can really spend a lot of time on technique, and then I can really get to the bulk of my session. So that's worked really well for us. Like I said, it's about an hour, 15 minutes, 2 days a week. When we get to the summertime, we go to a 4-day split. So upper, lower, and we're running every day. So we go Monday, Tuesday runs, Wednesday recovery, active recovery day, Thursday, Friday running again. So now I'm running 4 days a week as opposed to 2. When we get to that 4-day program, one of the things that's different is, we split our group at that point. So our group is actually split in the wintertime too. But in the summer, our skill guys are probably running about an hour 10 every day, and they lift for 45 minutes or so. The big guys are flip-flop. They're probably lifting for an hour 10, and they're running for about 45 minutes. And that's actually how we run the session. One group is in the weight room, the other's on the field, and then we flip who's in the weight room, who's on the field. Gives us a little bit more spread out, a little more access to the weight room. So if we're trying to do some of these PAP complexes and putting stuff together, we have the run of the weight room to be able to do it. And just from a training standpoint, our big guys, for the most part, right, they need to work more on that force side of the curve. Our skill guys need to work more on the velocity, and it's easier to do the velocity work on the field, easier to do the force work in the weight room.
Then I had a question, Coach, real quick. Do your freshmen follow the same progressions, your incoming freshmen, and what differs about their volumes and intensities, if anything?
It's a great question. So all of our freshmen who come in, they go through a rookie program.
Okay.
Well, their program is completely different than what the other guys are doing. So for the first 3 months, no, probably 2 months, because when we get them in the summer, it's probably about 2 by the time, because when we get to camp, we don't do too much. So the first 2 months or so, those guys are completely on their own, and they're basically in the phase the team was on in the wintertime. But probably even a little bit more slower and controlled. So they do a lot of eccentrics, a lot of technique work. We're slowing everything down. Before the season in those 2 months, I have no concerns over, I'm going to make this guy super strong and explosive for his first year of football. I'm going to make sure he can bend, that he's flexible, and that he's conditioned are kind of the big things. So we work on, all right, proper body positions, proper movement techniques, and then we do a lot of conditioning. We don't even do much speed work. We just get them in shape so that they can survive camp, for lack of a better word. And that's where we spend our time with the freshmen. Then the guys who are more advanced, most of the time, are the ones who are going to be playing or have a chance to play. So they kind of blend into the in-season program. The guys who are underdeveloped, they're in a redshirt program, and they stay in that rookie program all the way through the season. So they're going September, October, November, December. They're on a completely separate program through that time where they're lifting 4 days a week. And again, it's a progression. We start working our way up to some heavier work. They're not really lifting heavy until the end of the season. It starts with, all right, in the summertime, they've done a lot of tempo work, a lot of technique. The early part of the season, they're into more some volume and hypertrophy work, and then they're in some strength work by the end of the season. And then most of our guys, by the time we get to January, they're integrated with the rest of the group. But we have a group even in January, which we call our gold group, but it's basically still for our young guys in that first winter program. So some of our guys, our rookies who come in, they might get there in June, and they are not linked up with the true full tilt program the rest of the team's doing until April of the following year. So it's almost 9 months that they're doing something different.
Okay. And then logistically, how do you make that work? Are they completely separate from the team? Do they just have a coach specifically assigned to them, or?
So in the summertime, they have their own group because we have the time to be able to do it. So when we're in our summer training program, those guys have their own lifting time. It's a rookie lift. When we get in season, those guys are lifting 4 days a week. And so the way it works is, for us, our off day is on Sunday. And then Monday we come back and we do basically a walkthrough day. So on the walkthrough day on Monday, practice is pretty short. And so we run a group for the vets and we run a group for the rookies on Monday. When we get to Tuesday, we have a rookie only lift group. When we get to Wednesday, we have a vets only lift group. Then when we get to Thursday, we have basically we run 2 groups, but the vets group is more of a recovery circuit. It's probably 20, 30 minutes tops. And then the younger guys are still lifting for 45 minutes to an hour. And then Friday, we get after them pretty hard. That's kind of like our game day lift. Like that's when we hit heavy legs and really get after it. And that's the last day week. And just the young guys, just the red shirt guys lift on Friday. And so in summary, our vets lift Monday and Wednesday, recovery circuit on Thursday, and then our rookies lift Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And everything that we do is in the morning. They're bigger groups to be able to make that work, but it's done pretty well for us.
Thank you.
Please feel free to unmute yourselves, guys. There are 11 of us in here now, so please feel free to unmute yourself. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask them.
Coach, I'll be honest with you, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how the conditioning in different parts of mesocycles affects the power training. So what is your philosophy on that? What does that look like for you?
It's hard, right? Because we're not in an ideal environment ever. Like you're always trying to, all right, here's the time that I have, here's the variables that I'm trying to manipulate. There's no perfect laboratory setting where we can train our guys. I think the way that we set up our summer to balance the conditioning is our skill guys always run first, because we think that's a more important variable, right? Is their speed. In most of our like plyometric exercises, I incorporate into the speed work. They might do, when we get in that last kind of French contrast phase and we're doing some weighted jumps, it happens in the weight room. But a lot of our like bounding, hurdle jumps, single leg, lateral jumps and things like that, that's all taking place as part of their field work. So they're relatively fresh when they're doing it. I think that helps by doing that part of it first, at least for those guys. And we try to structure our week accordingly. So when we do our Monday run is really short. We do a lot of like ladder drills, CNS prep, and then we just kind of scratch, change the direction for probably 10, 15 minutes. Then the idea behind it is, all right, we fired them up kind of from the weekend, right? We tuned them back up. We got the system turned back on. And we lift upper body. So when they come back to run on Tuesday, nothing they really did on Monday is going to impact what they did on Tuesday from a lower body standpoint. So then we do our sprint work on Tuesday when they still have their legs under them, right? Then we lift lower body after the run. Wednesday is an active recovery day. So now they've got another day off to kind of recharge. And then we go back into it on Thursday with a similar idea that, okay, we're going to run first. So we're on pretty fresh legs. We can get after it. And that's more of our like dynamic change of direction day on Thursday. And then on Friday, they've just lifted upper body and done that change direction day. We hit very low volume, kind of top speed, might be 2 to 4 reps. And then we condition to finish it out. But the thing, Friday is the hardest day for us because we're like running. The way we do it is we do our sprint work, go in and lift, and then come back out and condition. Which there's a lot of different gears spinning. We've gotten used to it. It works for us, but we have to be a little bit more calculated because if we're gonna squat really heavy first, max velocity doesn't always work great after that because guys' backs are tight, their hip flexors are tight, they can't sprint really well. In contrast, if we condition and then go in and try to heavy squat, that doesn't work great either. So you just try to manipulate it the best you can. But we try to basically run first when the run is most important, which is for our skill guys, it is, and then manipulate where we fit in our upper body work and rest days to try to be at the highest level that we can be.
Any other questions, guys? See if anyone's got any more.
Well, if you guys come up with anything else, I had it up there on the screen. You guys can email me. You can look at my Twitter page. Like I said, if you want to know what we're doing right now, everything that we're doing training wise, I'm posting up on Twitter because I know there's a lot of kids out there. There's a lot of coaches out there. There's a lot of guys trying to train and make the most of the resources they have available. I'm sharing pretty much everything that we do, just to help anybody who wants to take a look at it. So if you guys check it out, look at that. That'll help give you some good ideas for what we're doing right now. If you have any other questions, you guys can email me. You can also, if you want the presentation, send me an email. I'll send you back the presentation and the slides. There's some of them, like some of the pictures and stuff in there I think are pretty good. I actually have some of them like taped up, you know, behind my computer in my office just to help reference certain things different times. So if you guys want any of that content or there's anything else I can do to help you, just reach out to me. Let me know.
I appreciate it, Coach. Thank you for your time today as well.
Absolutely.
It's nice to have, you know, I know we have the same bosses, so. And then one of your boys, Luke Tree, gave me a hat last week too, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's, like Coach said, to reiterate, if you need anything from him, please feel free to reach out, and vice versa. If there's anything that you need from me, any other kind of topics or questions that you guys may have or want to see, I can always facilitate that and try to figure that out as much as possible. I know on the Google form response, a lot of you guys have questions, so we'll start to, navigate through that as we go on. But every week this will be on Tuesday and Thursday. It's 4 p.m. And then there's also a podcast with it. So presentations will be on there as well, but also like Tommy Moffitt from LSU, Brian Johnson from Arizona, Breanne Brown from University of Houston. They've all been on the podcast, and then I got Coach Grant going on tomorrow as well. So trying to give everyone as much possible information and help during this time, and also just, you know, a way for people to kind of describe and share their philosophies and share their knowledge. So once again, I appreciate it. And also, actually, Coach Grant, you got to check out GymAware, but you got to check out their Flex one.
Okay.
It's same thing, price-wise, a little bit different. It's unreal. I'm about to get, flexstronger.com. I'll send the guy.
Check it out.
Your info. But yes, like I said, you know, fortunate to have coaches like Coach Grant and a bunch of other people on, and as well as our sponsors, Rack Performance and GymAware. So if anyone ever needs anything, please feel reach out. And Coach Grant, thank you for your time today. I truly appreciate it. If anyone else needs anything else, please feel free to reach out, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, email. My stuff's kind of all over the place, so I apologize sometimes. But thank you for today. And that is all, guys. If anyone has any questions, you can always reach out to Coach Grant, or you can reach out to myself, and I can always hook you up with them as well. Appreciate your guys' time today, and thank you for everything, Coach Grant.
Yep. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
No
Thank
problem,
you.
guys. Have a good one.
Appreciate that, Coach. It was fantastic.
Thank you.